Morning, this is Malin Johnson with On the Bricks, and today we're back at the Bank of the Panhandle with another business and breakfast. And since we've got breakfast under control now, we'll go to Sally, who's going to make us a lot smarter.
Good morning. Thanks for coming out today to another business and breakfast and to learn more about the ABCs of generations X, Y, and Z. So what is business and breakfast? The idea for business and breakfast came about last year when we realized the impact of small businesses on local communities. We know that small locally owned businesses reinvest much more in local communities than big box retailers or other retailers that are not locally owned. And so the idea was if we could bring together people, like-minded people, and brainstorm on how to make things better, that there was a lot of power in that. And so that was the goal for Business and Breakfast. Last year, we did an 8-week series, and this year we are doing a monthly series. This is month 3 of 4. Next month, we will be talking about living local. So in everything you do, just the importance of that being local. So why generations X, Y, and Z? I think we all have had circumstances in the workplace where there were challenges that were directly a result of working with different generations. And so technically today is supposed to be when taxes are taxing or not taxing, or I don't know, something about taxes. And after 2 weeks, we had one RSVP, and that was me. So we changed gears and decided to do something maybe a little more fun. And so that's how Generation XYZ came to be. I want to go around the room really quickly and just introduce ourselves. If you could tell me your name and what you hope to accomplish today. My name is Sally Hawkins. I'm with Bank of the Panhandle, and we just thought this was a fun topic, so we're excited to talk about it. Malin?
Malin Johnson, Main Street Diamond. And Sally, I like to learn something from Sally.
Audrey Marshall, I'm the director at the YMCA, and I just want to learn how to understand a little bit better different generations.
Tiana McCowan, CEO of the YMCA.
Good morning.
Same thing, here to learn and be part of the conversation.
Leslie Craich with TCEC. I'm Community and Members Relations Coordinator, and we always like to learn because we do have 5 generations of members, and thank you very much for hosting this.
Of course.
My name is Kayla McCarter. I'm with the Texas County Health Department, overseeing Texas County and Woodward County. I would just like to learn how to work with the different generations.
Hi, I'm Kai Barrios. I work with Good Street, so it's Urban Brew, Galleon, those businesses, and we also work with a bunch of different generations.
Great. So before we get started, I will say that this will be a lot more entertaining for y'all if you will contribute. So if I ask questions, answer them, and you won't have to listen to me for an hour. Our agenda today, we're going to talk a little bit about the silent generation and the baby boomers, but we'll primarily be talking about generations X, Y, and Z. Then we'll talk about specifically the millennials and Generation Z's behaviors in the workplace, some tips for workplace peace among all these different generations, and then finally, consumer behaviors. So this graph shows the U.S. population by age and generation. You can see, to me it's backwards, but whatever. The greatest generation, silent, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, which is also Generation Y, and then finally Gen Z. So the greatest generation is no longer in the workplace. So you have these 5 generations in the workplace now. Gen Z is just coming to the scene. And so whereas for the last 5 years or so, everybody's been obsessed with what millennials will do, now that is shifting to this next generation, Gen Z. Any questions about this? something that's kind of interesting is Gen X. You can see that there's almost 10 million less of Gen X than baby boomers and millennials. And so some people call them the sandwich generation because baby boomers and millennials, one, there were a lot more of them, but also they tended to have a lot stronger characteristics. So Gen X is mostly disgruntled. They don't get marketed to very well, and they don't feel the love like some of the other generations. Okay, silent generation. The silent generation was born between 1925 and 1946. They're very loyal. They are very good at teamwork, at collaborating. They're very diligent. They have strong interpersonal skills, which I attribute to the fact that they did not grow up with a device in their hand. And they were greatly influenced by the Great Depression. So when I think about the silent generation, I think about my father, who was born in 1946. And while he did not live through the Great Depression, his parents did. And so even growing up, I remember how they would scrape together all the leftovers to an extra plate and put it in the fridge to get it back out for the next meal. And they were very conservative in how they spent their money and how they spent their time. And the impact of the Great Depression was not missed on them. Do y'all have any questions about the silent generation, or do y'all know anybody in the silent generation that you can say, oh, well, they did this or that? Malin, I see you thinking.
I know a lot of them. And I think that
Is that accurate?
it's very accurate. And you're talking about the being frugal. It had nothing to do with how much money you had.
No.
It's just how much you saved.
That's how my grandparents are too.
Mhm.
They've got a lot of money, but they live in the same house that they've started off on. They have the same furniture. They still have the old school console TV.
Yes.
But they have a lot of money, but they won't spend it. They
Yes.
don't need anything. They don't want anything.
My grandmother refused to get a microwave. And so she left the coffee pot on all day because she didn't want to have to warm up her coffee. Leslie.
They also recycled
Yes,
everything. Once
they
it
did.
was used for one purpose, they recycled it to use for another purpose until it was absolutely worn completely out.
And not only did they not have a device, when the early ones didn't have a phone,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't have a TV.
Yes.
So they weren't even out there. The whole society was different.
And they still don't get one either.
Most of them
No.
don't.
Lots
We
of
had to buy
changes.
things for my grandparents in order for them to exchange it out or buy them a TV or
Mm-hmm.
introduce them to the computer. Like they wrote up a note the other day, wanted my mom just to type it on the computer for them, but they wrote it, handwritten.
Yes.
Handwrote it.
Yep. So definitely this is a generation past. And you see some people in the silent generation are still in the workplace. They are retiring very aggressively. We'll talk about the baby boomers in a minute that are retiring 10,000 a day. And so these generations are kind of on their way out of the workplace, and as we make room for Gen Z. So I thought some of these were kind of funny. So they're about boomers versus millennials, but I think they definitely connect beyond that. So just got to the hotel, think I'll order room service and go to sleep. Just got to Airbnb, want to check out that rave. Now, I definitely identify more here, but next week we're going to a training and we're Airbnb-ing it. Does anybody else use Airbnb? It's the wave of the future. Okay, baby boomers. Baby boomers have gotten lots of press over the years. I feel like they're sort of the generation that everybody has paid attention to. So they were born between 46 and 1964. They are work obsessed. They are very happy to focus more and announce that they're focusing more on work than on family. They are all about personal gratification. So they want the bigger car and the things that make them feel good. They'll indulge in those types of things. You see that by and large executive types fall into that baby boomer generation. Part of that, of course, is because of age, right? They're the age that most executives are. But part of it is because of their characteristics. They were greatly influenced by civil rights. by the space race, by Vietnam, by Reagan and Russia and all of those events. This is your group of hippies. So whether they identified as hippies or not, they distrust authority. So they're questioning the government and politicians and all of those things. They are the rotary phone generation. Most of them still have landlines, and so that's a huge difference from future generations. What do y'all know about baby boomers?
This is my other set of grandparents who happen to be 10 years younger than my
Yes.
baby boomer, my silent generation grandparents, and that lines it up exactly. But they just approach differently, they may distrust authority, but very much are working in their community to make it better type of thing. So
We were raised on talking about grassroots.
Yes, exactly.
That's-
They are very grassroots.
Is that you, Les?
Probably so.
Do you
Just
identify with
because
that?
I don't have any choice on when I was born, and we are impacted by our environment that we are in, and it is what it is.
For sure. I think, and you'll see that the millennials are the offspring of the baby boomers, and so you'll see a lot of these characteristics mirrored in a couple of generations. This was really the first generation where parents, maybe both sets of parents, were working, and that was, this is a generation of women's rights. There were a lot of good things. I say work obsessed, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. There were some good things that have come out of that. So Gen X. Gen X is the 1965 to 1980 group. Many of them are married with children. So I think about 70% are married with children. They're spending 20 hours a week on the internet. They're well educated, and what you'll see is that every generation from here on out is better educated than the previous. They're very flexible. This group has seen lots of booms and busts. They grew up watching their parents go through the 80s, and then they saw the internet online bust, and then of course 2008. And so this is a really resilient group of people. They value, when it comes to retail, they're all about the sales. They're conservative with their money. They want to be financially responsible, and so a sale is kind of like a free pass to them. Gen Xers have very strong tech skills, which means that sort of enhances their resiliency. So if they get laid off, they have the skills to go get another job in a different industry because they do have those abilities. They question authority. They don't necessarily distrust it, but they're asking questions before they buy in. What you're going to see in Gen Z, which is the offspring of Gen X, is that this group chose to have one parent stay at home. So whereas the boomers had many people work, both parents were working, then here in Gen X, lots of families decided to keep one person at home, and in fact, a lot of them ended up homeschooling their kids. So you see the increase of homeschooling. They're spending 16 hours of television a week, and they were greatly influenced by events like the Berlin Wall and the Iraq War. They really value work-life balance. So whereas the boomers were okay to work long hours, Gen X really wants that balance. And about 80% of Gen Xers are registered voters. 20% of those don't identify with a party, and only about 30% are voting in local elections. So to your point of boomers are voting. In fact, I watched a really terrible video last night talking about the boomers and how they vote. And did you see it? And how they were kind of mocking younger generations for not voting. And, the state of the world is your fault because you don't vote. But that's not, boomers vote, Gen Xers, they're kind of on the fence. And then I think you would see a decline from there. Generation X is also called the latchkey kids. Does that mean anything to y'all? So latchkey kids was a term used when, if both parents worked, then the kids just had a key to the house and let themselves in and out after school. They were responsible for raising their younger siblings, the millennials, and they were they are sometimes called latchkey kids. Sometimes they're called the slacker generation, which is a really terrible name, because their characteristics are not quite as strong and as bold as the boomers. What do y'all know about Gen Xers?
I have 3.
Do any of these line up?
Sort of. The latchkey kids, I remember it coming out. I sort of took it as a throw in the face to us.
To parents?
Women.
Oh, for working.
And this is a group that the baby boomers are much more independent and want to stand alone. This group likes to be together.
Mm-hmm. This is, by and large, the parents of Generation Z. And some of the stuff I read talks about them being helicopter parents. Maybe partly because they were latchkey kids. They want more control over their kids and what they did and how they lived and all of those things. What else? I always think about Gen X. I think about Gap. I don't know why. To me, that's the sort of a brand that identifies with Gen Xers. Anything else about Generation X? Let's see if I missed anything. Let's see. Okay. Boomers and millennials on volunteering. Millennials are way more likely to volunteer than boomers. I don't know, do y'all see that to be true?
You can see it in our own civic groups right here.
Sean's shaking his head. No, that's not true.
No, in Rotary, it's,
watching video games.
in Rotary we have this age group. We skip 10 years and then we have
The
the
millennials.
next. There's hardly anybody in the decade right before me or that I'm in. So it's true.
It's interesting. Okay, Gen Y, the millennials. I feel like there's lots of press about boomers and there's lots of press about millennials, and most of the press about millennials is bad. They were born between 1977 and 1996, and I'll take this chance to talk about generations, how they start and how they end. On any of these, you will see different start and end dates. Those are always pretty controversial. But one of the things I researched, there's a sort of a generational think tank, and how they determine when generations end is based in part on significant historical events. So if you have a memory of a historical event, for example, 9/11, then that is going to bunch you in a millennial, whereas if you don't remember that event, living it out firsthand, then that probably pushes you into Generation Z, which I thought was really interesting. And so this think tank, they are very kind of strict about 1996 being the end of the millennials. So if you're born after 1996, you're not a millennial, you're Gen Z. That would put you at about 5 when September 11th happened. And so you probably have a memory of it, and then in the years that followed, you heard more and more about it. And so that's how they decided that. There's 79 million millennials. It's really interesting when you look at how millennials choose to save or invest. Millennials watch their parents, the baby boomers, go through the internet bust, go through the 2008 financial crisis. And so given the choice between saving and investing, they choose to save. Like, we'll put our money in a savings account, even though we could make a lot more in a stock or mutual fund. That being said, if you have an advisor who will sit down and explain to the millennial, hey, you did see your parents' stock value tank. Did they sell out in 2008? And usually the kid will say, no, they stayed in, and so they've re-earned all their money, right? The market crashed, but it's higher than it was pre-08 now. And so it's really interesting. If you can explain that to them, then they'll say, oh, okay, I understand. And they're more willing to invest. But by and large, they choose to save. I asked my husband, who is a financial advisor, if that was true, and he said 100%. He said, if I'll sit down and talk to them, they can get it. Like, it's not that they can't understand it. They're just so scared of it because they watched what their parents went through, and they heard those conversations in the evenings. Gen Y is very well educated. I think about 1 in 3 ends up with some kind of college, maybe not a degree, but college experience. Millennials grew up in the world of globalization. And so I remember in college reading a book called The Lexus and the Olive Tree, and it talks about, you know, McDonald's being all over the world and not just an American thing. And so we grew up in this world where the world kind of started shrinking because of the internet and how easy it is to get information from other places. Just like Malin, we were talking about electricity. She was saying electricity was invented by Thomas Edison here, but by somebody different in Poland because they were all working towards the same thing, but they reached it before message got across. Trophies. These are the millennials have a very bad reputation for everybody getting a trophy. And so, you know, when you were little and in sports, everyone got an award, whether they were good or not. Wi-Fi, while we may remember dial-up, do y'all remember dial-up? Okay. While we may remember dial-up, we don't want it. We expect something much better than dial-up. We expect Wi-Fi, and we expect it free. Sports, most of us participated in sports, partly because our parents were working and their design was to keep us busy. At least that was my situation. But because of that, we're pretty good working in teams. We can work together. We're really ambitious. We set goals, much like the boomers did. Something that's a little bit different is we really want to be included, and that may go back up to the trophies, but we want to be we want to be included, we want to be accepted, we want to be loved, if you will. Diversity is something we embrace. It's not something that, you know, gender lines and race lines and sexual orientation, those are not things that are hang-ups necessarily for millennials. They can kind of, by and large, just accept people. Our big defining moment is terrorism and September 11th and school shootings like Columbine. As parents, I was reading an article that talked about, as parents, millennials actually spend much more time with their children than previous generations have. So in the 1960s, fathers were spending about 16 minutes a day with their kids. And for millennials, they're spending about an hour a day. Millennial parents are spending about an hour a day. I know. Like, this is a big deal, guys. An hour a day with their kids. And so they're making headway, but obviously we have a long ways to go. Purpose. 60% of millennials say they chose a job because they felt like it helped, they had a purpose in their job. So people want to feel like they are doing something valuable. There's a store in Amarillo called Purpose and Passion. It's a little store in Wolfland, and the whole store was started by a millennial. It's a retail store, boutique, and the whole store is focused on providing local artists a venue, so people who have local products, and a place for like sort of passion projects. So if there's, you know, bracelets made by somebody in Uganda, they sell them there, and then of course that money goes back. And so the whole store is really based on purpose and passion. So her passion is retail, and she's found a way to live out a purposeful life through that. So it's kind of an interesting concept. Gen Y is sending 20 texts a day. We're going to see that double for Gen Z. What else about millennials? Do y'all agree with these? What do you not agree with?
Well, this is just me personally. The trophy thing kind of eats at me because I was like, I don't care. I actually attribute that to the ones behind us. Gen Z, yeah.
You don't?
Yeah.
But I also
I
blame
agree.
the parents on that too. Like they were the ones coaching, they were the ones giving the trophies and saying this is, so.
I remember getting participation ribbons in track. I was terrible at track. I'm not a runner. I always got those green participation ribbons. That's what I remember.
I mean, I did notice they start to hand those out more as I got, but then we kind of got older, so I didn't want them. But I was like,
Yeah.
I
didn't do anything.
Right? Yeah. I really don't want this.
I know. I raised two, and they do not understand why you should be getting a ribbon just for participating. You need to participate at your very best level. You're not going to be good at everything that you participate in.
Mm-hmm. I've had an opportunity to listen to a couple of keynote speakers talk about generation gaps and those types of things. And one of them said that within the millennial group, there is a divide. And so by and large, across the board, millennials start their life about 10 years later than their parents did. So whereas our parents all got married in their early 20s and had children, we're delaying that roughly a decade. So I was in my 30s before I got married, before I had kids. So that definitely holds true for me. And in that time period, we're doing lots of different things, but about half of us are still living with our parents and not in a real hurry to do anything different. And going to school, we go to school longer, we're getting more degrees. That goes back to the education piece. And I heard a guy tell the story, and he said the parents of millennials are baby boomers. And baby boomers, if you can imagine, when they turned 18, their parents said, "Congratulations, son, you've reached 18, now go into the world and make your way." And they were kind of left to themselves. You figure it out. Then they had children, millennials, and their millennials turned 18, and they said to their children, "Congratulations, son, you've reached 18. My life was so hard, I want your life to be easier for you. Let me help you along the way. Let me help you get a car. Let me help you, if you're going to school and you need a place to stay, as long as you're in school, you can stay with us," those types of things. And so the baby boomers are, in large part, the reason the millennials are the way they are, for better or worse. But I think that's really interesting. I hadn't considered that decade. And in that decade, a lot of things happened. For me, I traveled a lot, and I did a lot of different things, got to try a bunch of things on and decide where I wanted to go. Millennials get a really bad rap for not staying anywhere very long. So between the ages of 18 and 22, millennials change jobs 6.2 times. But that's when they're in college.
And then you hear from your parents, "You're never going to be able to retire, or you need to find a job that you could retire at." And that's 60 years of working in the same place.
Exactly. And so after that 22, after they get out of college, you see a lot less turnover in the jobs. And yes, there are, and we can talk about some of those things. I had some, let me see. Okay, 54% of college-educated millennials expect to work 2 to 5 jobs, which is not terrible. I mean, that's not way out of line. When I think about the baby boomers, I think about Jack Welch, who spent 5 decades with GE, right? He was there forever. And so it is different, but it's not excessive. 45% would quit a job if they didn't see a career path that they liked. So they like to know that there's an opportunity for advancement. And then, this was kind of interesting. 80% of millennials sleep with a phone on their nightstand, which is definitely me. Is that anybody else? It didn't occur to me to put it anywhere else. I don't know. So I thought that was interesting. Yes. Well, so my dad puts his in his bathroom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it won't do you any good in there. He charges it on his vanity. Anything else about millennials? Here's what drives employee engagement for millennials. I feel valued. I have confidence in leadership. I like the work I do. Most days I feel like I've made progress. And this organization treats me like a person and not just a number. Do y'all agree with those?
The wanting to be included.
Mm-hmm. Wanting to be part of a team, wanting to feel valued. I assume you can relate to someone.
I'm like, man, if that stuff isn't true, then why am I helping you make money? Like, I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
My grandfather worked 35 years at a job he hated because they hired him in the Depression.
Was he a happy person?
He was Dutch.
What does that mean?
It's hard for them to be real happy.
He was Dutch.
Yeah, but I think that's the deal for that silent generation, and even somewhat for the boomers. The boomers were raised by this generation of people who said, you get a job and you better be happy there because you've got bills to pay. And of course, then for the boomers, they took on more credit and they wanted things like fancy cars and big houses, and they've passed that on to us. And the result of that is that they were tied in to where they were, whether they were happy or not. I have a sign in my office that says, do what makes you happy, because I have this conversation from time to time. You're not happy and you're not being happy makes me not happy. So let's figure it out. Either we need to make you happy here, or we need to find an opportunity for you somewhere where you will be happy. And it's not personal to me. I work with a really great group of people, but if they're not happy, life's too short. And so,
do you think that the younger generation is able to hide, or the older generation is able to hide that not happy in the workplace a lot better than what the younger generations are?
Something that I think is really interesting is that, which is I have even people who were born maybe just at that switch over between Gen X and Millennial in the 70s, they are much more likely to be in a job where they're not in love with it because
Their parents told them.
Yes, well, and because I had a conversation with an employee years ago, but I said, let's talk about this because I don't think you're very happy here. And she said, well, this is my livelihood and I don't have to be happy here. I have to have a job. This is my career. And that is their mentality. And so I think it's really interesting because they will hide it and, kind of put on a kind of happy face in exchange for that job security that they value so much. Whereas the millennials, which I don't identify with everything there, but I do identify with some of it. That's definitely me. Like, if you're not happy, life's too short. Let's figure this out.
I think there's a definite cut where people start to use the word happy. And that wasn't my parents and my grandparents. Happy was not something, you didn't aspire to it, you didn't even think about it. Responsibility and contentment is what you aspired to. Happy,
it's a feel-good.
That's a word that doesn't even really have a good definition.
Something that you see if you troll social media enough is you choose to be happy, right? But I don't think that's something millennials necessarily identify with. I think we're happy to do the work to be happy, but if we don't like a job or we don't feel these things, then why are we there?
And I think it's also the fact that we've been provided with so many more opportunities. Like, you can literally make money off of eating. You can make money off of trying on clothes. Anything you really, truly want to do, you can make money off of. So we have a lot more options thanks to technology and internet, but they didn't have many options back then. It was like this factory job, or the farm,
My grandparents tell a story, and they're they're the silent generation. Mm-hmm. So they went to college, and they said there is a teacher line, and there was this line, and there was that line. They're both educators, so they were put into the teacher line, and that's what they did. Now, I think they were happy. I mean, they're obviously very passionate about education and did it, but those were their options. One, it was rare for them to get to go to college anyway, so that was an achievement in itself, but the fact that they had to pick the teacher line, and then that's what they did, and that's what they continue to do, so, yeah.
And on the teamwork thing, like, I went to a school, they did not have sports for girls, so there was no really team building thing.
Yes.
The other thing
You could be in the pep club.
Cheerleader.
Probably wasn't that graceful. And also being raised in a rural area, us that were working out there pretty much worked by ourselves. And so if there was ever any challenge or issue, you fixed it, you moved on because you had a job project to get completed. So that is something for someone who is used to working alone, to work in a team is just mind-boggling at times.
Super overwhelming.
Yes.
Frustrating.
It's,
So we, at least when I was in college, teamwork became kind of the norm. And was it that way for you, Kai?
Yeah.
So we had team projects, but I think that they realized baby boomers didn't do it very well, and so they literally shoved. I had team projects in every single class I took, and something else that was kind of interesting is you see it even more with Gen Z as opposed to millennials, but open book tests became a real thing. And it was definitely somewhat of a thing for me. In law school, I could have a 1-pager. And so literally you wrote in like 0.05 font as much information as you could on this sheet of paper. And so you could take a 1-pager into the exam with you. But even more so now, you see open book exams. I know my husband went back to school a couple of years ago, and he had lots of open book exams. Online school, of course, everything's open book. And so you see a real shift from sort of curriculum-based to like just knowledge-based. If I know where to find it, there's value in that as opposed to having to have it all up here in my head. What millennials want, this is kind of more of the same. They want a sense of belonging. They want interesting or challenging work that pushes them to grow. They want a boss and coworkers that they like. They want a mission or a purpose that they believe in or support. And they want compensation and benefits. Y'all see that to be true?
The benefits, I still see a lot because I'm in this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot that still don't understand that having a job with benefits that can provide for your family they don't understand why that is beneficial.
Yes. One of the things.
The worth.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do at the bank is when we give somebody a job offer, we give them a compensation summary, which shows the value of the $7,000 health insurance plan and those types of the 401k, the 5%, those types of things that really add up, and you need health insurance. And so, but you'll see millennials and especially Gen Z, they're young, it's not really a high priority for them. Some of them do get it.
And the younger you get, like we'll go over that. And it's like, well, you get an additional $10,000. Well, can I just not get the benefits, but can I have that $10,000 put on the check?
I just like to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More of the face value.
Yes. One of the things millennials get a really bad rap for is expecting that they're worth more than their supervisors, the boomers, think they are worth. I don't know. I think that, I don't know. Y'all have thoughts on that?
Work, you just stand around and boss.
There we go.
I'm not saying you, but I'm saying that's the example. I've heard
teasing.
that before.
They have a really bad reputation for expecting promotions and some of those things. And we'll talk about that here in a minute because I think there's an interesting explanation for it. Okay, this is my favorite one. Reviewing work, if you didn't want it that way, you should have done it yourself, says the boomer. And then the millennial says, do you like my work? Which part did you like the best? Do you like it a little or a lot? Isn't it amazing what I did? And I don't necessarily agree with this last sentence, but I do think millennials want feedback. And in fact, surveys will say millennials would really like feedback once a week to know how they are doing. Gen Z is a little bit better, and we'll talk about that right now. So Gen Z was born roughly between 96 and 1998, depending on which survey you believe, and 2012. They're very entrepreneurial minded, so 1 in 8 wants to start their own business. They are truly the gamers. They have played video games all their life, so whereas I remember Nintendo, I haven't touched one in 20 years, maybe 25. Their college choices are really interesting. Sorry, I want to get to the right page. Okay, their college choices are really interesting. Generation Z is very apprehensive about taking on debt. And so most Gen Z members surveyed want to take on less than $10,000 worth of debt for college. And for those of us who've gone through college, we all know that it's a lot more than $10,000. So I'll be interested to see how that pans out, because I think it was like 60% wanted to take on less than $10,000 of student debt. As a result of that, they're choosing smaller schools, maybe lesser known schools that are less expensive. Here again, globalization, that's here to stay. Their world is at their fingertips literally with the internet. They can learn all sorts of things. They're sending 50 texts a day. You saw a rise in homeschooled children for the Generation Z. Family stability is a really big deal to them. There was definitely an increase in parents that stayed at home. So whereas the boomers, both parents were likely to work, Gen Z, their parents, frequently they had one who stayed at home. And it was interesting as I was researching all of this, I have two sisters that are Generation X, and then my brother and I would be millennials. So there's kind of a break in our family. And my two sisters stayed at home with their kids, and one of them homeschooled her children. And then my brother and I, both parents work. And so it's kind of an interesting analysis. Gen Z follows influencers on social media. Do y'all know what that is? Okay, because I researched the top 20 influencers and I had no idea who any of them were. So obviously there's a disconnect there for me. An influencer is just somebody who kind of like you were talking about, like tries on clothes or, does makeup. And I mean, these people have like 20 million followers. It's insane to me.
These kids watch kids play with toys.
Yes, that would be.
Playing with toys themselves.
Or sneakers.
Yes.
They do a lot of different things. Review things, give their opinion on things, and people are like, oh, I can't wait to see what this person says. Yeah.
And so social influencers is how.
I have no idea what YouTube has brought to this world.
I mean, it's a captured market.
It is.
You have your audience.
YouTube is an incredible, I mean, when we did social media, we talked about Facebook, but YouTube is incredible. And my son is 3, and he knows that we can watch kids play with his, he wants this fire truck, and he's like, can we watch Paw Patrol on YouTube? And that's entertainment for him. And so we have a room here at the bank. It's a training room, but we have some after school kids that end up here. Their parents work here, and they end up hanging out here. They all watch people play video games on YouTube. Like, that's what they do every day, which is fascinating to me.
I still have a PS4. I still have a game.
Yes.
My dad still plays, and he's Generation X.
Yes.
And then one day he was trying to request to watch me. It was so funny. I was like, I don't want you to watch me play. It's weird.
That's not my thing, but so influencers. So Gen Z is making decisions based on what influencers on social media are telling them. They, like millennials, are also asking friends and family. So whereas boomers asked or listened to celebrity endorsements, that type of thing, we don't care about what a celebrity says. We're much more interested in what somebody with 24 million followers on YouTube says. They're spending 10 hours a day on a mobile device, which reinforces if you think they're on their phone during work, they are. That's definitely happening. They have really high expectations. In fact, their expectations are higher than millennials. So I'm excited to see how that transpires for them. Overall, they have weak interpersonal skills. They've grown up on a device. They've grown up on a device, and so they're going to need a lot of coaching when it comes to working with other people. I know something we see that is a personal pet peeve of mine is I'll say, hey, did you talk to so-and-so? And they'll say, yeah, I emailed them. No, pick up the phone and call them. Like, I need you to either look in their eyes or hear their voice, because especially for boomers, silent generation, and mostly Gen X, they want to talk to somebody. They want to know that their banker is somebody that they can reach on the phone and not just, behind a computer. Feedback Gen Z is a little bit better than millennials. They want feedback every 2 weeks instead of every week, which is kind of interesting. And 9 months is not only the time it takes to grow a baby, it's how long they think it will take for them to get their first promotion and pay raise. What do y'all think about Gen Z?
Did you find anything whenever you were doing like your research on this generation that the feedback is not how you approach the feedback with them? You can't just directly tell them how. It's got to be more in a coaching.
That's actually, we'll talk about that. We can roll here too.
Sorry.
That's fine. So managing Gen Z, they want you to be upfront. They're gonna need help with conflict resolution because it's not, and they could text a breakup. They don't have to tell somebody that they're not gonna go to prom with them or whatever. So they need help with uncomfortable situations like conflicts with coworkers and customers, and they want granular feedback. And so that feedback, they don't like, oh, you picked up that fork, way to go. Like very, yeah. They want very specific. Yeah, like you look cute today. Those types of things. Or hey, you handled that difficult customer really well. And so they want very specific things. I think your point is yes. They would. Baby boomers probably had much thicker skin and were okay when somebody said, you did this wrong, go fix it. Gen Z and even millennials they don't mind hearing that they're not perfect, but they need it kind of softballed to them, no fastballs. Understand their mental state. Gen Z is, by and large, has much higher levels of anxiety and depression than other generations, which is interesting, but if you think about it, Gen Z has grown up in this world of kind of constant terrorism, school shootings, the safety that even I had, Columbine happened when I was in junior high, I think. So the safety that I had is not something they've ever known, really. And so that made some sense to me.
I would even say, sorry, but
Nope.
when I think about that, I even say the fact that you see what other people are doing all the time and that you may not be at that spot. Yeah, I'm like, oh my God.
Well, it's
everybody's
social
moving
media.
so much faster than me. You know, that's kind of what I thought about when I think about their mental state.
Mm-hmm.
See, I think of food. I think of the food that they're eating and that they've been raised on and the way that it's processed. Like from day one, they've had these processed foods that have made them uncomfortable, irritable, anxious.
And they probably have no idea.
Yeah. Bad gut bacteria, bad happy chemicals, and then on top of that, movement, technology.
And they see, your point's well taken, Tiana.
Yeah.
They see what everybody is doing all the time, and it's easy to feel left out. It's easy, bullying has become really, an incredibly big deal.
And I don't think they know how to relax. Very well. Because they're always trying to do two things.
Yeah.
And just sitting and relaxing with a cup of coffee on the patio isn't part of their.
So 31% feel uncomfortable if they're without phones for 30 minutes or less.
I left mine at home today.
What are you going to do, Malin?
Work.
Fair enough.
I tell my mom I'm not on house arrest.
And so I think that is very true. And I've read a lot about the backlight on phones. If you're supposed to turn your devices off 30 minutes or an hour before you sleep because it, stays in your, something.
Something like with image in your brain.
Younger and stuff, you dealt with the world, and then you came home and that was your safe place, and you didn't have to. And now that stuff is, because of devices, are being brought into the home.
I think that's just a sudden drastic change. They take it differently than some of us that maybe we've just been around too long. But a sudden drastic change, it's shocking right at the moment, but then it's like, okay, that kind of stuff happens. We'll just go for the better and we move on. Mm-hmm. Sudden drastic change, they question it, why, and they don't accept well, we can't give you any more in case of employment, that we can't give you any information because of the privacy laws. Well, why not? And it just goes on and on.
I think Gen Z is very used to having access to everything. And so that's for sure a change for them, especially when it comes to industries that have privacy expectations. They want you to provide tools for success. They are very good with mobile technology, and so they would like to be able to apply for their job online. Like, that would be ideal for them. If they can do training, if you can do that online, that's something that they can do, that they're used to doing. And so that's kind of a comfort for them. They mirror the silent generation in as much as they work hard, they want financial security, and the good news is they are willing to work overtime. So whereas millennials kind of snub their nose at overtime and think they should have the freedom to do what they want, Gen Z is like, hey, if that's part of the gig, I'll do it. Anything else about Gen Z? Okay. So now that we know all about these generations, what do we do with them? I heard a speaker who said this, and it stuck with me for 3 years, so I wanted to share it, which is there are really only 2 generations in the workplace. People who are older than me and people who are younger than me. That's it. We make it super complex when we talk about there's 5 generations, and there are, but they're either older or they're younger. And there are some really basic things that means. So if they're younger, they're more probably technologically inclined. If they're older, they're probably more systematic. They're maybe a little more critical because they've lived longer and had some experiences along the way. So in the workplace, advancement is a process. And so whereas technology can change, and in fact, if you look, probably the record to the 8-track was a lot longer period than the CD to the iPad, or iPod. Thank you. Technology happens at a certain speed, and now it's a very fast speed. But other things, like getting good at basketball, happens over time. And the only way to get better at it is to practice it. The same is true for a career. So it's important for millennials to remember that even though we live in a really fast world, not everything is fast. Like, perfecting a skill. When it comes to standard procedures, this is more for the millennials. There's a reason that procedure is the procedure. It may be a bad reason. It may be a reason that was good 30 years ago but is no longer good. But most likely the person that you're about to complain to about that process, they created that procedure. And they had a reason for doing it. So instead of saying, I don't understand why we do this, this is dumb, something like, hey, I know we do this, can you explain to me why, would be a better starting spot. Chances are that there was a good reason. Now, something that I find is that with the invent of technology, there are sometimes way better and faster ways to do things. And we have a lot of customers who don't care. Like, they want to manually do payroll or whatever it is, even though there are computers that can do it for them. And so to each his own, that's their deal. But our job is or what we try to do is offer them a better option. And so just be mindful of how you introduce a new idea. Now, that being said, this is a message for the boomers, which is, even though there are procedures in place, keep an open mind. Because technology, something that younger generations are good at, can make a lot of processes much faster, much more efficient. The speed of change. So I kind of mentioned this, but the world is changing at different speeds, or our lives are changing at different speeds for everybody. If you grew up and you're a millennial or a Gen Xer, you're used to the speed at which technology changes and the speed at which you can access information, right? You can Google something in seconds. For boomers or silent generation, y'all are technology immigrants. And so it's more challenging to, it's harder to accept how quickly things change. So I remember teaching my mom how to use a mouse. And of course there was a cord and but I remember that being a really painful process for her because it wasn't something she'd ever had to do before. And she had hand-eye coordination. It wasn't that she couldn't do it. It was just new. And so just remember that the speed of change is different for everybody. Anybody remember Beanie Babies? So when it comes to new ideas, for those baby boomers who are a little skeptical, and as millennials we get frustrated, just remember that not all new ideas are good ideas. So does anyone have Beanie Babies still? You waiting for them to go vintage?
My mom's kept them all.
Yes. So these people have lived through Beanie Babies. And so not all new ideas are good ideas, but some new ideas like the iPhone are good ideas. So just understand that when older generations are more skeptical, they've lived through Beanie Babies. Some things move slow. Careers being one of those things. There's really, just like there's no way to get good at basketball other than practicing, there's no way to perfect a career other than experience. So it's very hard to fast track that, even though you might want to. It does not help that you have baby boomers who have spent decades getting to the top, and so they want others to
struggle just as much as they
well, to at least have to prove themselves. And then there are some things that move really fast. And so I thought this was really meaningful. The printing press came around in 1400, and it took us 400 years to get a light bulb. And then it took us, Man on the Moon was in the 1960s, and in the last 50 years, it's just been like a steep climb. And really with the advent of the microprocessor, technology has just skyrocketed. And so technology moves really fast. And if you weren't born into that world, you do remember something different. And in fact, the majority of your life was something different. So I was telling my husband, I remember when we got our first Gateway computer, and Gateway had like this cow, and we had an Encarta, which was the encyclopedia. It came on a disc. And I remember my dad watching Martin Luther King give the I Have a Dream speech, and just how mesmerized he was that he could watch that on this computer. And for whatever, I was probably 8 when that happened. And so how far we've come just since I was 8, now he can watch it on his iPhone or wherever he wants. And so the world has changed really quickly, whereas the majority of my dad's life, that wasn't an option. We had old school encyclopedias that nobody needs anymore. At the end of the day, collaboration is really important, even if it's not always easy. Every generation brings a different skill to the table. And so if instead of thinking, oh, I wish, millennials didn't want things so fast, or I wish baby boomers were more willing to try new things, if we can all say, okay, at the end of the day, if we can all come to the table and have a conversation, then most likely we're going to come out with a better solution than we went in with, because we do all have different skill sets. And so even if that means duking it out, that's what it means. One of my coworkers is definitely a Gen Xer, and half the time drives me crazy, but I know we can come together and we can walk out with a much better solution than either one of us walked in with. So there's a lot of power in that. I'll do this really fast. Generations as consumers, boomers, Gen Xers, and millennials. How do you talk to them? Some of this is stuff we've already talked about. Baby boomers, they control 70% of disposable income. However, only 5 to 10% of marketing targets them. So they spend lots of time reading blogs, reading articles online. 70% will watch videos, which is amazing to me because I don't get YouTube very well. So they are computer literate, they are using search engines, they're on social media, they're watching 174 hours of television a month, which is 63% more than millennials. Do you guys watch TV very often? Do y'all have cable? Me neither. We watch, I don't know, we don't watch very much TV. We do other stuff. And if we do have it on, it's in the background. It's not something that we're watching. Yep. We watch a lot of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse at my house. Gen X, they are predicted to double their share of national wealth by 2030. They listen to the radio, they're still reading newspapers, and they're watching traditional television. They use social media. It's interesting, they are more addicted to social media than millennials. Gen Xers are bitter because brands ignore them, except maybe Gap. And 81% have Facebook accounts, which allows them to interact with companies easily. Now, when it comes to the millennials, they use Facebook a lot for recommendations. They make buying choices based on what they see on Facebook. They also ask friends and family. So millennials very much ask a friend before they buy a product. They use Facebook. 62% of millennials say that if a brand engages with them, they're more likely to be a loyal customer, which I thought was interesting. At that Purpose and Passion, whatever it is, that Purpose and Passion store, they handwrite a birthday card, and mail a birthday card with a discount. And I think that's meaningful. I didn't use the discount, but it was meaningful. It makes me want to go back now. 75% say it's important that a company gives back to society instead of just making a profit. It goes back to purpose and passion. Now, Gen Z, they mostly have bypassed Facebook, and they use Snapchat, Secret, and Whisper. Do y'all know what Secret and Whisper are? So I looked that up. It's basically social media, but you're like anonymously sharing things. There's something called Post Secret. Do y'all remember Post Secret? Post Secret's it's a website, and people can mail in postcards, and that's from probably 5-10 years ago. But it's they can mail in postcards with their secrets, and then they put them online. Yeah, it's interesting.
What Whisper is, but now
yes,
electronic.
Exactly. Exactly.
And you can do like within your location and stuff. It's just kind of weird.
Is that like the calculator app or something? You know, they have now they have the apps that look like a calculator. You click on it and it's a whole different.
Oh yeah, I had no idea.
To keep parents from
Maybe
looking through their phone or.
I got nothing. They trust social stars. Like I said, they follow about 10 influencers on social media, but they only 21% trust mainstream celebrities. So celebrities are definitely a thing of the past. They prefer real people when it comes to advertisements, and they use Snapchat. And so if you, as a business or a marketer, can become more active on Snapchat, which I don't understand. So do you use Snapchat?
I actually don't, but I know all of my friends do.
Yeah.
It's an oddball.
I've tried to figure out how the bank can utilize it, and we've really struggled to figure out what that looks like.
I'm just a creeper. Like, I'll watch everybody else's story, but we don't post anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it, huh?
I don't have time.
I mean, when I do, it's like 24 hours ago, 23 hours ago, like, you know, that type of thing.
Well, now Instagram has similar features to Snapchat where you can watch the stories.
The
so
stories.
it's almost not like
And Facebook
100%
too, right?
necessary.
Mhm.
Yeah, but nobody really
Uses
watches
Facebook stories.
Facebook stories as much.
I've never really watched them, but I just see that little circle.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But still, at the end of the day, I know most baby boomers feel like, hey, I just tolerate you because you can fix my technology issues.
That's good.
That's all I have.